In the pantheon of comic book history, few villains are as fascinating and as unique as Magneto. While there are so many examples of bad guys just being bad guys for the sake of being, well, bad guys, this long-time X-Men foe is a multi-layered, detailed character who can at times have a strong argument for being in the right. I mean, sure, he's massively extreme in his approach for the most part, but deep down Magneto's intentions are to look after his mutant allies who are being victimized and ostracized by others. However, there's one thing that you should never do to Magneto, and that is piss him off, because he might well end up on this list of the times that he went beyond just getting even and went right off the deep end. With this in mind, I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are the 8 most brutal things Magneto has ever done. Number 8. The paperclip trick. Collapse. Back in 2014, Marvel Comics made the call to once more give Magneto his own shiny new comic book title. Called simply Magneto, the book centered on the chaos and carnage that tend to follow Eric wherever he goes. And one horrible fate that befell one Dr. Elizabeth happened very early on, when she made the foolish choice not to spill the beans to Magneto on any and all heinous plans that she and her cohorts were cooking up. Now that was a big mistake. In brutal fashion, the master of magnetism cuts Dr. Elizabeth with a paperclip, which he then proceeds to move around her body from within as she screams in agony. Retaining the clinical edge that he's so famous for, once he gets what he wants, Magneto ends up killing her by slicing her brain with said paperclip. What a way to go. Number 7. Ripped out Wolverine's adamantium. Fatal attractions. One of the most iconic X-Men images ever can be found in the Fatal Attractions story, and centers around Magneto pulling the very adamantium that covers Wolverine's skeleton right off the bone. This all came from Wolverine thinking that it would be a great idea to attack the man who could literally control him like a meat puppet after Magneto shut down all of Earth's electronics. A pretty poor choice indeed that ended up in Magneto teaching the lad a pretty painful lesson by separating the adamantium from his very bones. It's one of the very rare times where the audience isn't actually sure if Wolverine will get back up again. And if it wasn't for Jean Grey literally holding his skeleton in place with her own all-powerful abilities, Logan would have died right there and then at the hands of Magneto. Number 6. A coin through the skull. X-Men First Class. Coming off the back of X-Men The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine, it's pretty fair to say that expectations were very low for Matthew Vaughn's 2011 X-Men First Class. After 2 fantastic opening entries in the greater X-Men movie franchise, fans had soured on the property due to the overall disappointment of The Last Stand and Origins. As a result, it was actually a massively welcome surprise that First Class turned out to be one of the finest X-Men pictures of the entire series. Set against the backdrop of the Cuban Missile Crisis, audiences got to see the formative years of Charles, Eric, and several other X-Men players. And by the time that First Class came to a close, Michael Fassbender's Magneto had truly begun his ascension to the dark side, not least in how he clinically and brutally offed Kevin Bacon's Sebastian Shaw. In an act of revenge for Shaw having decades prior killed Eric's mother, the future Magneto uses a tormented keepsake of a Nazi coin as his eventual murder weapon of choice. With Shaw immobilized, Eric counts to 3 and uses his famed powers of magnetism to slowly push this coin into Shaw's skull, then through the brain and out the back of his head. Number 5. He split Apocalypse in 2. Age of Apocalypse. Now, granted, 1995's Age of Apocalypse was a tad bonkers across the board, but in one of the most shocking moments of this shock-riddled event, we got to see the sight of Magneto splitting Apocalypse in 2. For the most part, it's constantly been taken as gospel that Apocalypse is the most powerful mutant in the history of mutant kind, but still, even he came to be on the receiving end of a total brutalizing when he faced off against Magneto during this year-long crossover special. With the pair standing face-to-face, Apocalypse beckoned for Magneto to fight him. As the Master of Magnetism refused to do so, Apocalypse again barked at him to fight back. It's then that you actually understand what's really happening, as Magneto casually quips, "I can't. I'm concentrating." In the blink of an eye, Magneto proceeds to literally rip Apocalypse in 2. Talk about sheer brutality, right? Number 4. He killed his own son. House of M. House of M is one of the biggest comic book tales in modern-day Marvel history. It centers on Scarlet Witch changing the entirety of the Marvel universe and follows a new existence for her and the rest of mutant kind. Spread across a whole variety of Marvel comic titles of the day, the 2005 House of M arc flipped the Marvel universe on its head, and now it was down to Logan to convince others that this actually isn't their reality and to put things right. This leads him to Magneto, who is actually the ruler of this new world, and he's not exactly a nice benevolent one either. And through their discussions, Magneto learns that Quicksilver has been manipulating Wanda. Furiously, he snaps at his son by raining down giant chunks of steel onto Quicksilver that kills him in the process. And by the time all was said and done, Scarlet Witch uttered the words, "No more mutants," and changed reality once more, this time to one where only a few hundred people have mutant abilities rather than the thousands previously. Number 3. Leaving SCALPHUNTER limbless. Collapse. So yes, SCALPHUNTER is technically a villain, and yes, SCALPHUNTER was on a mission to kill off his fellow mutants. Still, that doesn't stop Magneto's actions towards John Greycrow being any less brutal. Famed for being one of Mr. Sinister's marauders, SCALPHUNTER is a gun-for-hire mutant whose key ability is, like so many other of his fellow marauders, is that he's able to regenerate from any damage sustained. Think Deadpool, or maybe even to a lesser extent Wolverine. The point being that whatever you do to SCALPHUNTER, whatever damage you inflict on him, he's eventually going to shake it off and be back to his fighting fit best. Well, until he met Magneto, that is. Maniacally cutting off SCALPHUNTER's arms and legs wasn't enough for Magneto, for he was well aware that these limbs would simply grow back due to the mercenary's powers. So to make sure that there would be no regeneration this time around, Magneto had the, well, pretty genius but also completely psychotic idea to cauterize SCALPHUNTER's wounds. Sealing the wounds and stopping further regeneration is easily one of his most cruel moments. Number 2. Snapping Professor X's neck. Ultimatum. If you're looking for a comic book tale that fully embraces Magneto as a murderous, unhinged tyrant, you need look no further than Ultimatum. In that 2009 Ultimate Marvel miniseries, readers are greeted by a Magneto who is grieving the loss of his children, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. Doing what any bonkers bad guy dad would do, the Master of Magnetism decides to take out his own personal pain on the rest of the world. Having stolen Mjolnir from Thor, kind of, and maybe with a Doctor Doom assist, Magneto was truly unstoppable. He killed millions of the human race. And once this uber rogue was done with that, he turned to the Xavier Institute for Gifted Children to confront his on-off BFF. But after Professor X compares Magneto and his skewed viewpoints to Osama bin Laden, Pol Pot and Adolf Hitler, that's enough to push Magneto even further over the edge, to the point that he snaps his longtime friend's neck. However, that's not the only evil antics that he gets up to in Ultimatum because, number 1, he finally managed to kill Wolverine. Ultimatum. As mentioned before, Ultimatum really is Magneto at his most maniacal. Not content with killing millions of mankind and Professor X, the Master of Magnetism's body count also included Wolverine. For those not familiar with the Ultimate Marvel incarnation of the X-Men, this version of these iconic characters saw Wolverine initially working as one of Magneto's assassins. Eric had Wolverine infiltrate the X-Men with the intention of having Weapon X over here knock off Professor X. Of course, he realized that Professor X and his merry band of mutants are actually really the good guys of this world, and thus he turns his back on Magneto. Fast forward to the Ultimatum arc, and Wolverine ends up as, well, just another piece of collateral damage as Magneto turns civilization itself into pure crap. Having already sliced Valkyrie's throats and causing a ceiling to collapse on Captain America, Magneto soon has Wolverine and various other superheroes in his sights. For Logan, this goes horrendously, as Magneto pulls the old, well, I'm just going to rip the adamantium from your bones trick, as we've just talked about previously. But unlike those times in Ultimatum, it results in his death. With his cells damaged as a result of Magneto's attack, Wolverine's body is unable to regenerate and heal in its usual way, and that meant it was curtains for one of the most popular of X-Men characters. Absolutely brutal, right? And there we go, my friends. Those were 8 of the most brutal things that Magneto has ever done. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. If you want to chat to me more about superheroes or anything to do with video games, TV, wrestling, whatever else, go over to Twitter and find me at RetroJ with a 0. You can also swing by Live and Let's Dice as my personal gaming channel where I'm doing tons of live streaming at the moment, and it's very, very fun. Would love to see you over there. Before I go, I just want to say one thing. I detailed today about Magneto, an uber villain, as we called him. But you know what, my friend? You, yes, you listening to this video, you are not a villain. You are a good person, and you deserve love, happiness, and respect. Do not let anyone else make you feel otherwise. I hope that you're well and treating yourself fairly, both mentally and physically. But if you're not, that's okay, because we all have down days, and that's why we have friends, family, professionals in the support industry, because these people, they care about us and want us to do well. I hope that helps. Now go out there and smash it, you big ledge. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye.